Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I am honored to have Shawn Anthony with me. This is a familiar face. We did episode one together on my 180th episode, and now here we are. Shawn had made a promise in that one that, hey, if you keep doing this 100 episodes later, we'll get back together. We're a few past 100, but either which way, we're here today, and with Shawn, he has an amazing podcast that he runs called School's Over Now What? And then in addition to that, in his business, he helps folks really, market themselves, their businesses and what they're doing, and excited to dive into a little bit of the strategic part with him today. So Shawn, thanks so much for being on.
Hey, listen, man, I'm excited about this. I always find value in people who are consistent and keep going when the going is good, and that's you, man. Let's do it.
Absolutely. So where we left off from last time was, you've been growing your podcast and every podcast at some point can oftentimes think about a rebrand or, how to keep it exciting, how to show a little bit new. And recently you've started to do that. And so talk a little bit about, where the inspiration came from and really what you're adjusting to, keep it exciting, keep it new, not only for you, but for your listeners.
Yeah, I think you have to often think about how have my listeners grown. So your listener is either going to grow with you for a long time, or they're going to go with you on a journey until they get to wherever they're headed to, and you'll need to replenish that listener with a different type of listener. And I think as a podcast host, the way you stay true to this is you stay true to your message, you stay true to what you're putting out, you let what you put out attract who is supposed to attract and repel whoever it is and supposed to be a part of it, or supposed to be listening to it. And I think that's the key. You have to think that your audience is going to grow with you. The people who started listening to Schools Over Now in 2018, a lot of those guys have grown on to different careers, maybe choose entrepreneurship from learning from some of our amazing guests, or perhaps been in college and have now graduated,
Yeah.
and they're out there in the real world. So I think you have to continue to realize that your audience is going to grow just as you are.
Now, I love that. And just kind of thinking about that for you, once again, we're talking about in the scope of a podcast, but this could be someone who's been in the world of sales or they've been in the world of marketing and they've maybe, reached a plateau within their clientele and they're wondering, how do I take my business to the next level, right? I've kind of not become complacent, but maybe reached a plateau with who we're, marketing to, and we need to take that next step. And I think one of the hardest parts for people to take that next step is the fear of the unknown, right? Well, hey, I know this has worked at least this well, but if you want to go from here to here, right? If you want to make that next step, sometimes you have to venture into the unknown. So talk a little bit about, embracing the fear of the unknown and being willing to step into that next level.
Yeah, I think a lot of things that you have when you sense the environment or the energy of fear because you're walking into a new space that you never have been into, that actually could be a calling.
Yeah.
A lot of times the things that we end up doing in life that we become very successful at, they feel uncomfortable in the beginning.
Mm.
So I would challenge anyone listening to this is how can you make yourself more uncomfortable where that uncomfortability brings growth? And I think that's key.
Now, I think there's two, and we're going to say radically different mindsets on this. Some people say, hey, you just got to cut all ties with what you know and move into that next sphere because if you keep, playing in the smaller field, you'll never make that jump because the pressure's not strong enough, right? And then there's other people who say, well, stay with the consistent until you can, get we'll say new validation on the new ideas. So what's your mindset there? Or, if you're reaching out and talking with people, is it, hey, maintain what you already know and then just kind of slowly start integrating the new? Or is it, hey, make the bold move, rip the band-aid off and progress into the next sphere?
I think, well, whatever you're doing right now, you're acquiring knowledge. And I think it would be crazy to jump into anything and not think of any past knowledge you've already acquired. That's the leg up that you have. I think you have to recognize in certain environments, in certain settings, everything that you've learned can always go with you in that environment. And I think you have to realize, okay, when is the time to utilize some of those things I've learned in the past? And when is the time to realize that some of those things just don't even work anymore? The way the entrepreneur, in a way that a lot of people in this space, we're thinking in 2020 when COVID hit is a lot different than what we're thinking now, right?
Yeah.
The way that we look at and how we spend our time and the way that we respond, there's a lot of monumental moments in life that shift businesses completely. COVID was one, but the evolution of AI is another. I think it'd be crazy not to utilize it in some aspect. A lot of business suffered because they never could get the answer to the question that could really help them go to the next level. Well, now if you've acquired a skill set of asking questions and you know how to ask really good questions, AI can be your best friend.
Yeah.
So I think, you have to continue to grow, but also don't forget what you've learned. Just know when to pull that tool out of the toolbox.
That's really good. Now, for you, just in all of the different podcasts that you've done, something that has been a critical part to your success is cultivating the relationship. And I think for so many people, that is a lost art, is really one, making a connection, but then two, cultivating it, right? Having something that's more than just oh yeah, I follow him on Instagram or oh yeah, I talked to him one time. It's really growing that relationship. So talk about that for you and kind of, how you go about that with, connections you've made and how you really grow those relationships. And I think part of that is how you add value to the relationship.
Yeah, relationships that turn out to be the best ones are ones that are fostered. They're not the ones that you're like, "Hey, I got this for you. Hey, I got that for you." It's ones that you have genuinely taken the time to allow for yourself to understand the other person.
Mm,
And I think when you do that, you understand their wants, you understand their needs, you understand some of the sacrifices they probably have made, and then you can start thinking about how you could potentially help.
yeah.
Right. And there's this thing that I think is so important when you meet people, whether you're excited about working with them or not, that I value so much, and it's called 7-11-4.
Mm.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with 7-11-4. Are you familiar with it?
No, let's drop some
So
knowledge bombs here.
yeah, man. So the 7-11-4 method is, and this is a method that was created by Google, is that once someone discovers you, once someone really likes you, do you have 7 hours of content for them to just digest the moment they come across you? Do you have, 11 different touch points on how they could come across you, right? So the 11 different touch points could be TikTok, Instagram, it could be so many different things. And then are there four different locations where they can feel and sense your presence? So for some people, it might be speaking at conferences. For some people, it might be being a guest on podcasts. For some people, it might be, that keynote, that panel, or that opportunity to teach in front of their job or classroom, right? So the 7-11-4 method is how you get someone interested in wanting to make a purchase from you rather than just pushing it down, right? So, a lot of us that are definitely in thought leadership spaces, entrepreneurship spaces who are front forward facing, we tend to undervalue whether or not we have that. And if we don't have that, we need to start building up those assets to have a 7-11-4.
That's really good. Now, someone here, is listening today and they go, I've got two, right? I don't have 7-Eleven for, I've got two. What are, kind of first steps that people can make to not get overwhelmed and be like, oh, well, I have two. How am I ever going to get to seven? But hey, how can I go from two to four in the next 2 months, in the next 6 months, right? And really just
Yeah.
growing those avenues.
Yeah, I mean, this is how you can do it. I think the best position you could ever put yourself is a guest on a podcast. If this was a couple years ago, I would say everyone in the world needs a podcast, but everyone doesn't.
Yeah.
What you need is you need to be on the opposite side of a microphone where you're seen as the expert, the go-to authority, and someone else is asking you questions where you can articulate and answer a certain way where you stand out.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the fastest ways for a 7-11-4. That's where, you're on shows, you're going to have plenty of ways to get to 7 hours of content. Typical interviews are averaging about 25 to 30 minutes. So
Yep.
when you look at that, now you might have 11 different touch points. Now you're on their TikTok. Now you collaborate with them on Instagram, four different locations. Now you might be an invited speaker to a panel where this person you just spoke with has invited you, or vice versa. So there's many ways of doing this. Some of the listeners that are listening right now, they might actually have a podcast. And if they have a podcast and they've been doing it for a while, especially, I think you mentioned you've done over 280 episodes. You
Yeah.
got way more than 7 hours of content. And so then
Right.
the next thought process should be, okay, am I in like 11 different touch points? Am I in four different locations? And I would say the next strategy is shifting towards that.
I love that. Now, for you, kind of tying back into cultivating relationships and how you've done that and really, become an expert in many different areas, one of them being helping others do what you just said, get onto podcasts and get in front of cameras where they can be, perceived as the expert. So talk a little bit about how you've cultivated that into really a business, instead of just something that you're encouraging people to do. It's been a business avenue for you at this point.
Yeah, one of the best blessings I ever had is when I was corporate, and we talked about it last time when I was corporate and I worked these corporate jobs, right? And I was a brand manager at companies like Target, Macy's, and Belk, very prominent companies. And I remember those job reviews. And those job reviews, I had a boss who told me what I was really good at. And you know what was so crazy? He said, "Hey, Shawn, you connect with people very well. The way people collaborate with you, they just get really excited." And he gave me an exceed expectations. And I said to myself, well, that's a gift, and I'm not even trying. This is
Yeah.
natural.
Yeah.
At that point, I fostered the gift, and I said, okay, how do I continue to, push it up? Whenever you find out what you're good at and you're not even trying at it, that is the gift. And I think it's how can you amplify that?
Mm.
And at the time, when I became a full-time entrepreneur in 2021, I started brand managing so many different talent from Terry Isioma to Rachel Rogers to so many different people. And I saw where the money was coming from. And the money was coming from the strategic podcast placements and placing them on shows, things I was doing. I wasn't even trying. I just naturally knew the fit was going to be right,
Yeah.
and I was able to turn that into a business model. We have a whole team surrounded by it in terms of our signature offer being a 30 show podcast tour. And I think that's the key is identifying what you're good at and then putting everything you got into that and watching what happens. And I think, that's how we've been able to turn this into a full-blown business. And then on the backside of that is when you have a business, it's two different sides of it. There's many different businesses, whether they are product or service based. And like you might go to a restaurant, you might have a good meal, but that might be it, right? The food
Yeah.
was good. On the back end, they got to clean the dishes, they got to do all these different things. But in the business that we're in, we're not only just helping the person that needs the exposure, that wants to get out this amazing message, but we also are helping the podcast host. You and I both know, one of the hardest things to do with podcasting is, especially from a consistency standpoint, is to not only have guests, but have good guests that have been vetted, that add value to your audience. And so we've been able to build amazing podcast host relationships because we're keeping them at the forefront of what we're doing. Me being a podcaster myself, I know when you got a good talent and when you got someone you're like, oh man, I don't even know what to ask them.
Yeah.
So we give them the talking points, we give them, everything they need to have an amazing experience.
I love it. Now, for you, and you can talk about a few of your, good examples, but I know recently, Mr. Knowles, the father, Beyonce was, a client that you've been working with and kind of, promoting some different, his story, but then, different events. So talk a little bit about, um, I don't know, I guess really just making sure that someone's a good fit for you and your business, but then also once they are, like your buy-in to promoting them.
Yeah, and that's years of fostering relationship, right? So, Matthew Knowles, Beyonce's dad and Solange's dad, he was someone that I interviewed on my podcast, and I interviewed him on my podcast back in 2019. And when I interviewed him on my podcast in 2019, he quickly became my mentor. So for years, he mentored me behind the scenes and watched what I was doing, and gave me advice on what I was doing, from putting people on shows to realizing that I was going closer and closer towards management. And earlier this year is when he made the ask of, hey, look, I got a lot happening in so many different categories. Could you help me with this? And I think figuring out who you're going to work with, it takes a lot, right? It takes the ability to understand, can I really help this person? Would I enjoy working with this person? Could this person I'm working with open new doors for other people? And he checked all those boxes. So
Yeah.
then when you take that talent on, it's like, okay, how do I not only, announce this talent, but how do I put them on things that they just would have never had done had they not, had started working with us. And I think that's the key is you always got to think about that client first. You got to think about the long-term relationship. And again, there are times where, you're going to learn so much from them. It's just only going to help other people.
So as you say that, I think I don't want to say mistake, but one thing that happens frequently for people is they get the introduction and there's a lack of relationship, but they ask for the big ticket item, right? They ask for the sale, they ask for the opportunity, and it's premature, right? It's early on. There's really no great bridge of a relationship there. So for you, you say, hey, in 2019, my ask was for you to come on the podcast, and then through getting to know each other, you became a mentor to me. And then the ask in 2024 is, hey, I want you to manage, this much bigger opportunity for me. So talk about that for someone who's listening, who's, maybe they're in the sales world and they, just met somebody that they'd love to have as a client, but there's really, no fruit in the relationship yet. It's more just a connection. And, once again, I think there's a time and a place to ask for things, early on, but there's also a time and a place to grow the relationship before you make the ask. So talk about that balancing act for people that are in the relationship growing business.
Man, listen, the balancing act, the real secret way of winning to this is being genuine and authentic.
Mm,
And I think that's the key, and being patient
mm,
and being a student in so many different ways, right? Everyone that you meet, no matter how much money they're making, no matter what their economic status is, they can teach you something.
yeah.
Everybody, and I think it's so important to recognize that and see that with people and don't look at them as a dollar sign. Look at them as the ability to learn something from, but also there's a reason why you met them. Like you just don't know why, but there's a reason why you met them, and it always comes back to something, And I think about some of the people I've been blessed enough to meet where there wasn't a financial gain. In fact, I probably spent way more money even trying to get to them that later on turned out to be a real gain and knowledge and wisdom and insight. I remember the first time I traveled to the West Coast while I still was working a job, and I did it, on a vacation, but it
Yeah.
was really just PTO. When I traveled to Laguna Beach and I met Ed Milet, I would have never met Matthew Knowles if I didn't meet Ed Milet.
Mm.
So you never know what is on the other side. You just have to be genuine, authentic, and just go with the flow and allow everything else to evolve.
Well, since the podcast is called Who Knew in the Moment, maybe share that story of how you guys got connected through Ed Milet in your guys' relationship.
Yeah, yeah. So, when I went to, I remember, back in 2018, I had started my podcast. I interviewed Ed Milet on episode 42. And I remember how it happened because at this point, people were just tagging like their favorite podcast of all times, their top five, and they were tagging Ed Milet, myself, and a lot of the most amazing people we've heard of. And I was just resharing it, and I reshared it, and Ed Milet slid in my DM and he said, "Hey, look, let's make it happen. Let's collaborate." And I thought he was playing, but it led to the contacts being exchanged, the address given, and going to his house in Laguna. And it was so interesting because I had watched all the episodes. I had watched everything you can imagine. This guy was like literally the Tony Robbins of podcasting when podcasting started.
Yeah.
And I remember going to his house in Laguna. I was nervous. I remember knocking on the door. He had to go down this long path to get there. And I almost gave up. I was like, man, I came this far, but I think someone's there. I think we're too early. And then, man, I heard this voice. As I walked away, I heard this voice yelling. And he has the aura. I'm trying to give you an example. He has the aura of probably what you think Dwayne Johnson has,
Yeah.
like The Rock. So at this time, 2019, he was real buff too.
Yeah.
He yelled, "Shawn!" And I came down, and as I got ready to meet him, there were a couple people at his house. At this particular time, Ed was known for doing these fire interviews with guests at his home.
Yeah.
And so the guy that was leaving had another person with him that kind of looked like an agent. And he said, "Shawn, you know this guy?" And the guy that was there, I remember like it was yesterday. I had just watched an ESPN 30 for 30, and it was the guy who was blind that was playing for USC at the time. So I remember seeing his face. I said, "Yeah, I remember his face." And Ed says, "Yeah, you might want to exchange contact. You need to know this guy. You need to know him." And I didn't think anything else of it. I went downstairs. We did a fire interview. Took a long time to get downstairs because all the staircases and all that stuff. And I didn't think too much of it, and I remember going back after the fire phenomenal interview with Ed that led to so many other connections. I remember going back and looking at that contact, and that contact at the time had a lot of contacts. And he said, "Hey, who do you want to know?" And I saw the list, and I said, "I want to know Matthew Knowles. I want to interview him." And I remember that 2019, it got set up. We did a podcast together. And the podcast, we clicked instantly. And after the podcast was over, Matthew Knowles called my phone, and we started our whole relationship. We had a whole hour conversation after the podcast. That later on led to the mentorship and to where we are today. And I think again, it goes to walking into any room as a genuine, authentic person, not expecting anything, but being open to possibility.
I love that, and I love really just kind of how you went about the relationship, and I like the mentorship part. Now, for you, when seeking a mentor, I think from my experience, maybe you've had a different one, but from my experience, I think so frequently we see someone that's good in their financial life, or we see someone that's good physically, or we see someone that's good in their relationship, and we call them our mentor, and then all of a sudden we think they're going to be able to give us great advice in all aspects of our life. And the reality is sometimes people that have done really well financially may have not done so well in their personal fitness or their physical fitness, or they may not do so well in their relationships. So how for you have you kind of cultivated, mentors in different areas of your life to help you grow in each spot, opposed to just relying on someone that's really good at this area and then trusting that we also think they might be good in other areas?
Great way to frame the question. I think mentorship, the fastest way to answer that is mentorship, when done correctly, is that you are identifying specialists.
Mm,
So you're identifying someone who's really good at real estate. You always wanted to learn real estate. They're like amazing at it. Mentor me in that. Someone who is really good dad. Like,
yeah.
who cares about what job they got? You know how hard it is just to be a dad.
Yeah.
Mentor me in that. Someone who's a really good husband and you see how they take care of their wife and they take care of their family. Answer me in that. Someone who might be, depending on your religion and your faith, someone that might be a pastor or a preacher or a bishop or whatever religion you have spiritually, mentor me in that.
Mm.
I have never in my life seen someone who checked all the boxes. I just ain't seen them.
Right.
I don't. I mean, I've never seen anyone check all the boxes.
Yeah.
I think you have to identify who are those people that can help you in those fields, and be okay with understanding that okay, this person might be helping me in this category, but there might be some other examples. And I think anything you observe, that you learn, that you study and apply, find out ways to do it in the way that you like it. You're not going to agree with everything they say, but
Nope.
you are going to find some things that you can take with you and then do something with.
I think that's really good because, so frequently I think, and I think the first example of the mentor that oftentimes people will reference is a parent or a sibling, right? I think
Hmm.
those are pretty natural, progressions, right? Hey, I always looked up to my mom, or I always looked up to my brother, whatever it is. And all of a sudden you're going to them for advice about quitting your 9 to 5 to start a job because you love them, right? You respect them, but you go, they've never done that. They've never started their own business. Why would you go to that person for that advice? Maybe to your point, find somebody that's successfully made that transition, go to them for the advice. And I think then the second part that becomes really hard is not discrediting the opinion of the person that you love and trust and respect, but saying, hey, this isn't your lane. I'm actually going to follow this person's advice and go there because I'm sure for you, like me, there were people that you really loved, respected, and trusted that were close to you that when you said, hey, I'm going to go off and do an entrepreneurial thing, they go, what the heck are you thinking? Like, this is crazy. And it's not because it's crazy, it's because they had never done it. And to them, it
Right.
seems crazy. So, talk a little bit about that element as well.
Yeah, I think that's whenever you have a desire that people might not get a hang of or understand fully. Whenever you have those desires, it's really hard to have those conversations with people who've never done it.
Yeah.
And they project fears they may have had.
Mm.
They project the incapabilities they may have had. They project the hard and how hard it would be because they had a hard time. And I think, in entrepreneurship, it's the most unpredictable, most rewarding thing if you can truly find the small wins.
Mm.
Small wins that add up. Small win. I didn't have to clock in today. A
Yep.
small win. No one told me what to do.
Yeah.
Small win. I actually could, at this very given moment, after this podcast, go have lunch with my wife and get back to work. That stuff never happens if you don't
Right.
done it yourself. One of the hardest things I had to do, man, it was be at a job when I was making at the time my side hustle was a six-figure side hustle. The hardest thing was to be at that job and listen to someone tell me what to do, knowing what I had going on.
Yeah.
And I think, the way you beat that is you got to get your ducks in a row at that point. You got to realize, okay, what level of a job do I have? I think it's way easier if you're listening to this. Man, it's way easier to quit a job that isn't bringing you a lot of income.
Mm.
So if you're listening to this, let's say you're in a medium style income. You're making 40 grand or you're making 60 grand, and I want you to think about this. That's a whole year of your life
Yep.
and a whole year of stress, maybe doing something you don't enjoy. If you enjoy your job, that's different. I was promoted 6 times in 4 years. I actually was enjoying that run. I was young, but I also was acquiring so much different skill sets that has helped me now. And I think that's how you got to look at it. That's how you play it.
I love that. Now, for you, as you are, working and doing, like the Pod Pro tour, talk a little bit about, some of these tours that you're doing and, how you're deciding where's going to be the most value add and, what's going to be the best for, our clients and just the, opportunities at hand. Because I think that becomes one of the hard parts is where you're at today, 6 years into a podcast is there's so many opportunities that you have to say, well, which ones are going to, be the most beneficial versus which ones, 6 years ago, I would have been stoked to, have that. It would have given me one of my 11, right? But
Mhm.
now I need to be more strategic on, which of the 11 I'm going to actually travel down.
Yeah, man, I love this question. When we launched Power Pro Max, and we launched Power Pro Max last year, and it started honestly. We met a phenomenal entrepreneur. Her name was Arlen. Her name's Arlen Hamilton. So Arlen Hamilton's a big time VC, big time pioneer in her space. I mean, she had done everything, man, like Oprah, CBS, everything you can imagine. I was already brand managing talent. She said, Sean, I got someone that manages me. I got someone that does this. I got someone that does that. No one does podcasting the way you do. She
Mm.
said, how about we put me on a podcast and we put me on several podcasts and we just do like a tour. And she was the very first person we ever did a podcast tour for. And we did a 30 show podcast tour, which is our signature thing that we do now. And we learned so much while doing it. What I like so much about doing it is that we were able to get her opportunities that would have cost a crazy amount of money if we had went the media buy route. And we got those opportunities, obviously, because of our genuine and authentic relationships. But I think when you look at strategically placing someone, one of the very first things we do is we have someone take an intake form. So we have an intake form. We understand about you, your character, we understand podcasts you already been on, so we aren't even wasting our time pitching those shows.
Yep.
We also have the data to understand similar shows to even the things you want to do, and also have an idea of things that you may have done in the past that can get you a broader reach. Down to the point now, man, we have so much analytics and data on podcasts. We even can tell someone what the political party that we believe your audience is voting for.
Mm.
And so we're so strategic in doing that and utilizing all the tools we have to make sure that the show has an engaged audience, engaged listenership. Where are they located at? I think all this is so strategic when you think about taking a talent and putting them somewhere where it matters.
I love that. Now, for you, and even me, I'm a little bit later to the podcast game than you were, but I think to your point earlier, you made the comment of consistency. In that 2020 era, I think everyone and their dog created a podcast, and most people lasted about 4 episodes, and they weren't Joe Rogan yet, and so there it went. Today there's still a lot of podcasts, but there's a heck of a lot less that are still, actively growing and increasing. So talk a little bit about just the landscape of podcasts and, in your opinion, why it's such an important medium for people to be able to go on and, share a story, be a expert, in their area.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally vocal audience that is a community.
Yeah.
You have an audience that is listening to voice. People are so crazy over Clubhouse. Podcasting is a voice,
Yeah.
that you can listen to, that you can learn from, that you can attract people. I think that's the biggest difference that I'm seeing now with podcasting is not only that it gives you the voice and the platform, you also can be strategic to even meet the people you want to meet that you would have never met, so that when you do meet them, they know who you are.
Yep.
We were in a conference right now, feeling you walk past. I'm like, oh, does that feel?
Yeah.
Because we've already have a rapport, right? You
Yep.
never would get that without having a podcast. You'll just be in line, or we'll just be in line and wouldn't even know who we are, right?
Yep.
So, I think you'll be almost insane not to see that podcasting matters. I think for people that are doing it or thinking about doing it and don't want to stop and want to be consistent, they have to have a show that has a mission, has a purpose, so that even when you don't feel like doing it, you're reminded on why you do it. And also too, looking at some of the feedback and comments the audience is giving you over time. There might be a comment they could have given you to improve your show, or it might be a comment that you can look back at to motivate you to cut the mic on and keep doing the show.
Yeah.
So I think that those things are very important.
I love that. Well, and so two things I'll kind of mention there. First one, you look at this last, and this is not to go political, but the last presidential election and just the impact of a podcast, right? I mean,
Oh man.
you saw both sides, right?
Yeah.
Harris and Trump both went on very different podcasts, but I mean,
Yeah.
talk about reach, right? Yeah, it's not the national debate. No, it's not at all. But don't tell me that a podcast isn't important when, presidents are willing to sit down on them as part of their, campaign running.
Oh man, I like that you said that. And not only that, but look at want to go even deeper, look at the targeting, look at the audience. I mean,
Yeah.
come on now. You know what I'm saying? Like, you do a party with like the Nelk Boys, a
Yeah.
podcast. Like, that's a different style, reach, different demographic. To me, man, all that stuff is marketing, and you can get out marketed. That's what
Yeah.
happened.
Absolutely. Well, and the second thing I want to tie it to, and you made the comment earlier just about being an entrepreneur, and sometimes the win of being the entrepreneur is just like you said, today I have flexibility to go do whatever the heck I want. Or,
Mhm.
I don't have to go in on Saturday morning, not because I'm not going to work in my business on Saturday. I just don't have to do it Saturday from 8 to noon, right? Like I have control of that. And I
Yeah.
think finding some of those we'll call them small, right? In regards to like they seem small, but they really, if they're important to you, it's not small, it's a big deal. But even, flipping that towards, the podcasting world or just your growth in general, I think so frequently people, you know, they don't want to look at these small wins and see them as wins. They usually look at the overall goal and see, well, I'm not there yet. And so talk a little bit about that for you in your life and just how you've recognized, man, all right, yeah, I'm not where I want to be, but it's a step in the direction of where I want to be going and how that can just continue to light the fire and keep you hungry.
Man, I saw a quote that really stuck with me. I don't know who said it, but it was, sometimes we don't recognize, like, we really don't recognize the small wins because we've set the bar higher.
Yeah.
And so for me, this time of year, December is a perfect time to kind of like reflect and kind of look back and like, oh, that really was a win.
Yeah.
One of the easiest things right now for content, this is a content idea, depending on whenever you're listening to this. If you're listening to this month may have already passed. But if you're listening to this and this is in the month of December or the end of the year, primarily December,
Yeah.
you could do a best of strategy where you put out on social media content the best of whatever year you're listening to this in. So like right now, everyone's getting ready for 2025, but you can be putting out best of 2024. And what I found out, Phil, by doing that is you want to remind people of some stuff you've done that is really cool in the year. And they are absolutely, there's people right now in the month of December who have given up,
Yep.
who are literally laying down. If you even hit them up, they're already telling you, "Get back with me in January." Me,
Yeah.
I hate that. I dislike that. I hate the strong word, but I
Yeah.
strongly dislike that. It's like you really gonna live your life as if the next 20 plus days don't even matter.
Yeah.
I think that's so key. And so, like a best of style for content for me, it's helping me looking back at small wins that probably turned to be very lucrative the following month. Whether it was things I was featured on, things we've accomplished with clients. So I think right now you should look back at those small wins that way, and realize and appreciate them for what they're going to be able to help you do in the future.
I love that. And I think that concept of reflecting is motivating. And I don't know if I had a spare 5 minutes the other day, and Spotify does that for podcasters, right? A little bit of
Uh,
like a breakdown of your info. And it was cool. It was like it says, hey, you're 81 people had you as their number one podcast. And you're just like, dang, that's something that I never think about in my week in and week out of releasing the episode, but it's cool to look back on the year and say, man, 81 people said above all the other podcasts in the world, like, this is the one I'm going to spend the most time listening to. It's like, man, that's great. Well, that motivates me to want to be like, all right, 2025, we got to do another, 52 episodes, one a week. Let's get after it.
Absolutely, man. Could you imagine, right? Let's talk about it for a second. Could you imagine going to the Apple store and waiting behind 81 people?
Yeah.
You'll leave.
Right.
You know what
Hands down.
I'm saying? Like if you got to the Apple store, they're like, hey, listen, yo, Phil, thank you for being here. You're 82. I'm like, what? You will leave, So
Yep.
I think recognizing just how many, dude, if 80 people came into your house right now, you'll go nuts. I don't care
Yeah.
how big the house is. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? So like, you will go absolutely insane. So I think, looking at that, man, that's impressive, man. That's impressive. And it could keep you going. I remember when I started my podcast, I interviewed this guy. His name is a good friend of mine. His name's Mims. He had a song called This Is Why I'm Hot. It was the number one song in the world in
Yeah.
2007. And I remember after that interview, and I was very, very new to podcasting. A guy left a comment and he said, Shawn, thank you for releasing this episode today. I was getting ready to take something that was going to take my life. And because I listened to this, I'm more motivated than ever to keep living.
How cool.
And man, it's been so many times, even to this day, where I'm like, man, I don't really want to do this. But I think about it.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what I'm saying? So you never know your impact, man. Small wins matter.
I love it. Well, I am one appreciative of having this opportunity to connect again and do episode number two, but excited because this just means, probably in a couple of years we'll have to do episode three and see all
Yeah.
the growth that's been in your world. And I just appreciate you sharing the knowledge and the wisdom that you have today, my man.
Absolutely, man, and appreciate the hard work that you're doing. Keep at it. I'll be back at 100 plus episodes. Who knows? There might be another special guest, might be a crazy announcement. Who knows, man? I love these milestones, man. So keep at it. Keep doing good. You're doing a great job.